So thanks everybody for coming. I'm Liz Schlegel from Central Vermont Community Action Council. I'm the Outreach Director and I work in the Energy Efficiency Education programs. Also here tonight is Bob Murphy from Efficiency Vermont and Brad Cook. Brad, what's your business name?
Brad Cook from Building Performance Services in Warren, Waitsfield.
So we're here because we know that people need some help and support and some information on what to do now with the unexpected renovation project that nobody wanted or planned for or wanted to do or has the money to do. We wanted to try to put our resources together. Bob and I work on a program called Button Up, which is about helping people, save energy and make their houses more comfortable. And when Irene came, we pushed regular Button Up back and made a flood Button Up. And so that's what we're here to do. Bob's going to talk to you a little bit about Efficiency Vermont's programs. I'll be available to talk about Community Actions programs. And Brad is going to take us through the presentation. He's a BPI, Building Performance Institute certified technician. He's an energy efficiency professional and has actually been going door to door in the valley helping people out. So, I want you to know you're going to be able to ask questions. If you have an urgent question, I think Brad will be able to handle interruptions. And otherwise, we're trying to make sure there's plenty of time at the end.
Thanks, Liz. I am Bob Murphy, and I've worked for Efficiency Vermont for about 7 years. Thank you for all coming. Thank you all for coming here tonight. I pretty much spoke to everybody as you came in, but I just wanted to go through the packet real quick with you before Brad kicks off. Of course, this has been a very dynamic situation in the past 2 weeks on what Efficiency Vermont could offer you as flood victims and people in the Mad River Valley and Waterbury and all the other communities that were affected by this terrible storm. So initially in your packet, we came out with a summary sheet about 2 weeks ago. And it doesn't have a whole lot of detail, but it does give you some helpful numbers and some links. So this was the baseline to help you find some resources and help from Efficiency Vermont. This past Thursday, working with the state, because all the incentives that we dole out have to be approved by the state, these two pieces, the blue flyer and the white flyer, which is the heating and hot water replacement incentives. We'll go through these on the slide, but I just wanted to reaffirm what you have in front of you. The blue flyer is kind of critical. It's for homes and businesses. It's a home assessment. So if your home the mud's been shoveled out, in most cases people have taken sheetrock down. If you contact Efficiency Vermont with your FEMA number, we will schedule a home assessment. One of our contractors, somebody like Brad, will come out and do first a moisture assessment. Second, they will also then do a blower door, which measures how leaky your building is. And then they will do, if the building is dry enough, they will do some air sealing and insulation. Primarily, that's meant for the basement. That's where the most bang for your buck can be accomplished. Then they will also do a more substantial report of what they find. So other areas, specifically your attic or any other things they come up with, they will identify in a report to you. Also, importantly, I left off is all our BPI contractors will do a combustion analysis. So if your heating equipment happens to still be there, and a lot of you I know that's not the case, if that old equipment was still functional, they would do a test of that heating system to make sure that there's not carbon monoxide and that it's operating properly. So we'll go more in depth with this in a little while, but these are the key pieces that we included for you tonight. We also included the Cliff Notes version of the FEMA mold guide. If you haven't become a mold expert in the past 2 weeks. And on the other side of the packet, besides tips to stay warm this winter, which may be a challenge for all of us. Our home performance with Energy Star incentives, the home audit program, is detailed in this flyer here. And I probably overstayed my welcome, but if you have any questions after the presentation, feel free to see me. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Brad.
My name is Brad Cook. I am a home performance contractor. Our shop is located in downtown Waitsfield. We weren't affected, thank God. My sincere heart goes out to those that were. I've seen the devastation. Hopefully this information we're going to give you tonight will help you to make some informed decisions and take some informed actions in the next weeks to come. This presentation was originally produced by Central Vermont Community Action Council in partnership with Efficiency Vermont and VCAN. This is a modified version for after the flood. Tonight we're going to cover how your house works. As a home performance contractor, we always look at the whole house. Usually what you do to one part of the house will affect another. If you seal up your basement and you don't deal with the moisture in the basement, your relative humidity is going to go up. You're going to have problems with mold, mildew, asthma, respiratory problems, so on. We're going to talk about the initial steps. Many of you have already taken them. Some of you may have not taken them far enough. But what are the initial steps we have to do after the flood? We have to get out the bad stuff, get ready for the new. Addressing the building envelope. We start to think about what is our thermal envelope. Sometimes, particularly builders, they don't think about the thermal envelope, and sometimes it's not continuous. So it's like a wool sweater you're wrapping around your house. Think thermal. We're going to talk about mechanical systems, your heating, your hot water, ventilation, and other topics beyond that. The biggest point to remember is that the house is a system, and you've got to look at the whole house. There are a lot of resources available. A few spots, few places like the Mad River Valley headquarters has tried to consolidate them all in one spot, but there are a lot of resources to help you get through this. Your eventual goal is to have a warm, dry house that won't get flooded again. So the most important thing is to deal with those portions of the house that were directly affected by the flood. If you don't treat them properly, you're going to have problems down the road. Air, when it warms up, expands. The molecules have got more energy, so they push out. A balloon expands when you heat it up. Warm air is less dense than cold air, so it rises. This is how a chimney works in your fireplace or your wood stove. The warm air going up is more buoyant than the air surrounding it. This is what happens in a house. At the top of the house, the warm air is at the highest pressure, and it wants to go out through all the nooks and crannies and cracks and crevices and openings that you have at the top of the house. In the middle of the house, the pressure is usually more or less neutral, and the pressure in the basement is usually negative. So it wants to suck in air from outside. And when it sucks in that air from outside, it's picking up all of that stuff that's in the basement, the moisture. And just like a chimney, because we call it the chimney effect or the stack effect, it's going up through your house and out the top of the house. So as a home performance contractor, what we try to do is cap off the top of that chimney. That's our first mission, close off the top of the chimney. Then close off the bottom of the chimney. Now most of you are going to be dealing with basements that you're going to have to rebuild, maybe re-insulate or insulate for the first time. This is your opportunity to close off, cap off that chimney and slow down that air leaking out of the house. That's the air that you've warmed up with your fuel dollars. And generally, for most houses, 30 to 50% of your heat loss is air leaking out of the house. And oftentimes it's one of the easiest, relatively speaking, things to correct. So the first thing, I think most of you have done this, you have to remove and clean. You have to remove anything that absorbs water, anything that is organic, paper, wood, cloth. You can't clean the mold out of it. Mold sends out these fingers, and they will go into the organics, and you can't just wash them out. They go too deep. So you have to throw them out. The next step is to dry out the walls, dry out the basement. When you dry out the basement, if you have a dirt floor, or if you have a lot of moisture coming through your basement, the first thing you should do is cover that with plastic. It's like wearing a raincoat in summertime. You're going to keep the moisture from evaporating into your house. I know some of you were trying to dry out your house with fans. On a day like today, it was up high 70s, almost near 80, and the relative humidity was around 90%. That means the air was holding 90% of the moisture it could possibly hold. So any moisture in your wood is not going into that air today. It's not going to dry out. As a matter of fact, because of that stack effect, your house was probably sucking in that warm, moist air from outside into your basement, which is relatively cool. And as it cools down, the relative humidity goes up until it's the dew point. And when it hits the dew point, you get water on your walls. That's why you have sweating pipes in the basement in the summertime. So a day like today, if you have your windows open, you're allowing that warm air to come in, you're actually bringing moisture into the house. So cover the floor with plastic so you're not trying to dry out the ground. That's a losing battle. Remove anything that is wet and organic. Get it out of the house to the dumpster. And then you have to clean up. You can clean up while it's still wet, you might as well. When you clean up, you really need to use soap and water. If you don't use soap and water, if you don't actually get the dirt off the surface, you're probably not going to kill the mold. Some people are going in and they're spraying with bleach. Bleach kills mold, but it doesn't penetrate very far. So the CDC, Centers for Disease Control guidelines, recommend that you use soap and water and clean it first. That will usually get rid of most mold. Then if you want to, spray it with bleach or a mildewcide. Or some people got a pressure washer right away and they pressure washed everything down into the basement. It's all wet anyway. Let's pressure wash with bleach, and that did it. If you haven't done that yet, and now you're going to go and you smell a lot of mold and mildew, I strongly recommend you wear a good mask. You can get the disposable masks. Some of us that wear glasses, the glasses fog up. Spend a little more money and get one with a one-way valve. You can get them down. I know some of the local hardware stores carry them. One-way valve will help keep your glasses from fogging up. If you're going to use bleach, you don't want to be breathing all that air in. That bleach can do a number on your lungs. So I'd get some fans into the area where you're spraying bleach solution. And you only need a half a cup to a cup of bleach to a gallon of water. Don't mix it 50-50. Don't use it full strength. It's very caustic. It's a very strong oxidizer, and you don't want to get it on your skin. I might also recommend, if you have one, they're not that expensive, get a respirator that you can put an organic filter on. The organic filter will filter out that bleach smell. It will capture it. But the best defense is fresh air. It's also a good idea to wear some rubber gloves or disposable latex gloves so you're not getting your hands sitting in bleach or mildewcide. There's our disposable mask. I might even suggest a disposable suit. These are sold in local lumber yards. Some of the hardware stores carry these. They're not very expensive. And the best thing to do is get lots of fresh air in there when you're spraying with bleach. So mold prevention, keeping it dry, getting rid of the water and keeping it dry is number one to prevent mold. Mold is everywhere. It's just waiting for a chance to grow on a surface. Mold can lie dormant for a long time. And all it needs is some moisture and some organic food to be active and start growing. So keep your relative humidity down, keep your moisture content down, and minimize and avoid conditions that can contribute to mold growth. Drying out your home. On dry days, that's the key word, dry day. We're running out of dry days. We're running out of warm days. It not only has to be dry, but it has to be warm. Because as air warms up, it can hold more moisture. So if the air outside is at the same temperature as the air inside, even if it's at 50% relative humidity, it's not going to absorb a lot of moisture. But if the air inside the home is warmer, and this may take a heater, a kerosene heater, maybe a propane heater. Yes, they put moisture in the air because it's a chemical reaction, and it produces water as a byproduct of burning that fuel. But that's far less water going into your air than what you can remove by heating it up and moving it outside. So that warmer air inside your house, when you heat it up to 80 degrees or 85 degrees, can hold a lot more moisture than at 70 degrees. You get that warm, moist air outside and bring in some fresh air. That's how you transport the moisture outside. You could also use a dehumidifier, but these little dehumidifiers, they take a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, and they have a limit to how much moisture they can take out at a time. That's why when you call a professional company to come in and de-water, they bring in these monster dehumidifiers. You want to use a moisture meter to check wood surfaces. This is a typical medium-priced, not very expensive moisture meter. When you take the cap off, it turns it on. There are two very sharp pins here. And what you do is you press them into the surface of the wood, and it's measuring the electrical resistance between the two pins. These are calibrated, technically they're calibrated for one species of wood. So they're very accurate for that species. But for our purposes, close enough for most types of wood you're going to encounter. This particular one has a little LED light, and you read the highest light, and that is what the moisture content is. And that is, again, relative moisture content relative to the most water that that wood could hold. This is a professional kind of moisture meter. Does the same thing, but it gives you a digital readout in percent moisture content. In a typical home, your wood around the home is 8, 9, 10% moisture content. Anything that is over 21%, 22% roughly is ideal conditions for rot. Rot's another organism that'll eat up your wood. So greater than 21%, you're going to have rot occurring. You want to get that wood below 19%. They're recommending 15% to be safe, because these moisture meters, the inexpensive ones, are not that accurate. They may be off by a couple of percent. But if you get it below that 19%, or the guideline is 15%, then you can be sure you're not going to have rot. Those organisms are going to go to sleep until you give them more water. This one will also do scan. You can do other surfaces, and it does capacitance, so I can look into a surface to see if there's moisture without actually penetrating it. And I can also drill a couple of holes, and I have insulated probes so I can go into the wall and measure the moisture 6 inches inside the wall. In your home during the winter, you want to pay attention to your relative humidity. I recommend everyone get a relative humidity meter. This particular one is about $18. You can get them for $10, $12, as long as it reads temperature and humidity. They're all within about 5%. That's accurate enough for our purposes. But you want to know, is it really humid in the house? If you have a relative humidity in the house in the winter of much more than 40%, and this could be from not drying out your house properly, this could be from tightening up your house, air sealing and insulating your house, but not dealing with the moisture that comes through the basement walls. It could be, and it could be, that solarium you have on the south side of the house with all those plants that are expiring. Or it could be from the lap pool that is over in the annex. But these are all things that put a lot of moisture into the air. Sometimes people put the pot of water on the wood stove. That worked back in the 1800s when there was no insulation in the walls and the air blew right through. Take that cold air from outside, come in, you warm it up, the relative humidity goes way down. So of course they were dry, but our houses are tighter today. So you may not need that pot of water on the wood stove. Get a moisture meter and check it. Try to keep it below 40%. The ideal range is roughly 20 to 40% in the winter. And of course, in a day like today, there's not a darn thing you can do about it. It's humid out. So during this drying process, when you're checking your moisture meter, pay attention to the relative humidity in the house, what's outside, and think moisture. How can I get this moisture out of the house? And it may take a while. When you think about closing up your house, you want to think about insulating. The number one rule I want everybody to know about and remember is to air seal before you insulate. It kills me when I get the call from a homeowner, had the house built a couple of years ago, huge, huge ice dams. They've had 3 contractors in there. We go in and we find 2 feet of loose cellulose. Wow, that's an R80. That's a huge amount of insulation. They didn't air seal. They actually had walls at different heights that were just open to the downstairs. They didn't close them up. Huge air leaks. You can put 2 feet of fiberglass over your attic hatch, but if you don't seal it up, the air is going to blow right through it. So air seal before you insulate. I want everybody to know about this. I'm sure Great Stuff doesn't like me for saying this, but those Great Stuff cans, I'd say probably a third of them don't work. They're pretty much one shot, and you don't have good control. This is a foam gun. Several of your hardware stores and lumber yards carry them. There's a company on the internet called EFI.org. They sell all sorts of efficiency materials, tools, light bulbs, fans, and these guns, and this foam. This gun costs roughly $30, $40, $45. I have a whole bunch of them. You put a can of foam on it and never take it off until it's empty. Never leave it off. So you see I got a gunk of foam on the end of the tip here. Just let it sit there and it's all dry. I'm just going to take my fingernail and clean off the very tip. Just clean that foam off, because that's where the foam comes out. When I pull this trigger, it's pulling a steel rod and opening up the tip up here. This is all filled with foam. Back here is a little knob. I usually keep this closed when I'm done at the end of the day. When I'm ready to use it, I back it off. If I want a little fine bead, I turn it off maybe a couple of turns. This is the 1-part spray foam. And this is how it works. Let's see how this behaves tonight. There we go. So you see that nice bead, nice control. I let go of the trigger, it stops. So you wanted to fill a little crack underneath the window. Now you want to fill a bigger gap alongside the window. I open it up a little more. See how much faster it comes out? Let's stop the trigger. Let go of the trigger, it stops. And if I open it up even more, it can really fill up some volume. This will take a little while to set. Might take 30 minutes to start setting up to the touch. The thicker it is, the longer it takes. A little bit of moisture, a little mist of moisture will help speed it up. There are different kinds of foam. This can will last a long while. There are different kinds of foam. This is the common one. It doesn't expand that much, so you use it around windows and doors. You can also get a black foam that is ultraviolet resistant, so you can use it where the sun's going to shine on it, won't break down. Here's another one. This is Pure Stick. This is actually a construction adhesive. Just a slight variation of that stuff. When you go to put up sheetrock, plywood, foam board, rigid insulation, use the same foam gun and put a quick bead of this on, it sticks pretty good. Good substitute for construction adhesive. I do recommend disposable gloves when you're working with foam. You might also want to get a can of cleaner, but really be sparing with this. Don't use it very often or very much. Never clean the end of the tip. Just let it dry. The next time you use it, just scrape it off and close this up for the day. The can gets empty, leave it there until you're ready to put on a new can. That's about the only time I use the cleaner. Take the old can off, throw it away, quick squirt, put the new can on, you're ready to go. Purge it. Every couple of weeks you might want to purge some out, or you might want to do your whole house, give it to a neighbor or a friend. If you just sit this on the shelf for 2 months, it'll eventually clog up. You have to throw it away. You've got to purge it every few weeks.
How much is a can of that? How much is a can of the foam?
The can of the foam is around $20, $25 for a 23-ounce can. So, priorities for air sealing. Up in the attic first, close off the top of the chimney. Then in the basement, close off the bottom of the chimney. The center of the house is usually not as important unless that breakfast nook you sit at every morning, you feel a draft, because that's where the prevailing western wind comes through the house. Then you might want to do some extra air sealing around there. So, common leaks, common places where air leaks out of the home or leaks back in down below. Around bathroom fans. Actually, I see a lot of bathroom fans aren't even vented outside. Sometimes the builder just puts fiberglass over them. There's no duct at all. Sometimes they'll take the hose and stick it down into the soffit, or stick it up into the attic. Problem is, if you use that, you're turning this fan on, you're taking warm, moist air, dumping it into a cold soffit, and I've seen a lot of soffits rot away because you just keep dumping this moisture into the soffit. Recessed lights. They're a little harder to do. You don't want to pack insulation around them. You don't want to be putting this foam right onto a recessed light. Some lights that are recessed, you're not allowed to put any insulation within 3 inches. You have to look inside the light and see, is it rated? It will say IC for insulation contact or non-IC for not insulation contact. And I'm not going to go into all the details of how you do each one of these. We can talk about that later. I'll talk about the do-it-yourself workshop and other opportunities. The attic hatch. If you have a means of getting up into the attic crawl space, usually that's a big leak. Many times it's just a piece of the sheetrock ceiling cut out and put a little trim around it. No insulation, no air sealing. Pass around a couple of types of weather stripping. This is a basic V weather strip, and this is more of a cushiony one. These are the kinds of weather strip that you could use around an attic hatch, or you could build a more formal attic hatch, something with some weight on it, out of plywood, build a box, and put this kind. These come in 8-foot, 7-foot lengths. They're meant for a door. It's called Q-lawn. This is good for an attic hatch, a basement door, or even an entry door. It's nice and squishy, very forgiving. So this is if you're going to do any substantial weather stripping, I recommend this kind. It's called Q-lawn, and you'll find it also at that EFI website. Sometimes it's hard to find at your local hardware or lumber yard.
We can cover that when we talk about the skill shop. You know, just kind of go through what we can do so we can get to
Sometimes you have chases. I've seen ventilation shafts where they ran a furnace duct up to the second floor. And it happens to go all the way up to the attic and never closed it off. So you want to look for things like that. Down in the basement, around the band joist, that's the first floor framing just above the sill, just above the foundation, common leaks. Dry laid stone foundations through the top 2 or 3 feet, even below grade, are big leaks. Plumbing stack, any plumbing or electrical penetration. You know, plumbers, if they have to run a 2-inch pipe up into the attic, they're not going to drill a 2-inch hole. That's too much work. They're going to drill a 3-inch hole so they have plenty of room to just slide it right down. You need to seal the rest of that space. Chimneys, another big one. We sometimes see huge gaps next to a chimney up in the attic where I can see all the way to the basement. Again, this one's a little bit trickier because you don't want to put anything combustible up against a chimney. So you don't use wood or plywood. We use metal. In this case, metal rolls of aluminum flashing that we tack to the wood and spring it up next to the chimney and then seal it with a high temperature silicone. That's that red silicone. Dryer vents, windows. Insulating the sill plate around your sill. If you have a regular sill like this, regular 4-flaming, and it's not a post and beam kind of 1800s house, you can take rigid insulation, cut it to fit, put it up against the band joist, and use this foam to seal around it. The caution is, don't just put the rigid insulation up there, because we're back to moisture. Warm, moist air gets around that, gets trapped between the rigid insulation and the band joist, which is now very cold in the winter. It'll condense. It'll soak up, get soaked up by the wood, and it'll rot away.
Isn't that toxic, and doesn't that need to be covered with 5/8" sheetrock?
The question is that toxic? This is not toxic. This particular foil-faced insulation here is called polyisocyanurate. It may be toxic if you eat it, but it's only really toxic if you take a torch and hold against it. It will produce toxic fumes. The fire marshal, the state fire marshal, has actually said in an unoccupied place, like in an attic crawl or in a basement, it's okay to leave that exposed. They do recommend if you use the pink board or the blue board, the extruded polystyrene, you cover it with a thermal barrier. Or if you have a contractor spray on 2-part foam, that should be covered with some sort of fire barrier. Finding air leaks. The best way to find an air leak is with a fan. We have these big fans that we can seal to a doorway, close all the windows and doors in the house, and we start up the fan to blow air out of the house, and as that air is blowing out, it's starting to leak back in. So if we take something like a smoke, this is an educational toy. You could take incense. We use a chemical smoke puffer. You can actually see the air coming in. In many cases, you can use your hand and you can feel it coming in. Sometimes, if you close all the windows and the doors in the house and you put a couple of box fans in outside windows and just take some cardboard to tape off the extra space, that's enough to push air out of the house to help you find where's the air coming in. Start at the top, go to the bottom, don't worry too much about the middle of the house. Where's the air coming in? How can you stop it? Going around and putting little gaskets into your outlets and your switches is going to stop some air, but it's nothing compared to some of these other air leaks that you're going to find. Infrared thermography. You can use infrared thermography to find air leaks. I am a level 1 certified thermographer. I have a good mid-range camera. I think some people put too much into infrared thermography, thinking you can just look at something with a camera and it'll tell you everything. It's a little more complex than that. A camera can help you to find poor insulation, poorly performing insulation. It can help you find moisture. Moisture in wood or in a wall, if it's evaporating, it's cooling down, just like spritzing yourself in the summertime. So with an infrared camera, which sees very, very tiny differences in temperature, I can see that cooler spot, and I go over with my moisture meter, and most of the time, yes, there's much higher moisture there. So you'd have to, this is not something you're going to just buy. You'd have to call a contractor. After you've dried out, after you've air sealed, insulate. In the basement, you want to use products that are not going to absorb moisture. You don't want to use cellulose in the basement. This is cellulose. Pass this around. This is chopped up newspapers, and this particular brand that I use has a chemical called borate added to it. The borate is a fire retardant and a mildewcide. So you won't have mildew or mold growing. It's a Class A rated insulation product. You can put it in loose, but if it's in an enclosed cavity, we use a special blower and pump it in under pressure to pack it in, and air doesn't move through it, which means it's quieter for sound. It also will prevent a fire from running up the stud wall. But it absorbs moisture, so you don't want to use it in the basement. That foil face insulation, that's fine. Pink board, blue board, hire a contractor to do 2-part spray foam. Those are all appropriate for a basement. Fiberglass is not great if you've got a damp basement. Some products like spray foam and rigid insulation are actually vapor barriers, and if properly applied, can keep the moisture from entering the basement after you've dealt with liquid water. Checking air quality. When we do a blower door test, we want to see how tight is the house. Ideally, we want to make a house that's tight so that we can ventilate and ventilate right. If you don't make a tight house, Mother Nature will ventilate when she feels like it, and it's usually not when you need it. Don't store products in the basement that can give up vapors. I've seen a lot of people store propane tanks in their basement. That's very dangerous. Gasoline, kerosene, anything, paint thinner.
Paints freeze. We keep our paints in the basement because they can't freeze.
You can put paint in the basement, yeah. That's.
We just said on that not to.
So you have a lot of decisions to make. We have a few more things to talk about here. Heating systems. Are you going to stick with the same heating system, or are you going to do something different? Right now there are some very good incentives from Efficiency Vermont for biomass. They now make some very good wood pellet boilers that can replace your existing oil or propane boiler. They're self-feeding, self-regulating. You clean the ashes out once a week. They burn very efficiently. Think about whether you want to go with sealed combustion, which is bringing in outside air for combustion and blowing your flue gases out the side of the house. So you're not sucking in inside air for combustion. When you put in a heating system, that's going to be there for at least another 20 years. So think about not the efficiency now and what it's going to cost you to run it now. What's going to happen to fuel prices in 10 years or 20 years?
Hey, Brad, can I get a show of hands of people that have to replace their heating systems? Wow.
Bob will go over rebates a little bit more later, but here's a quick chart on some of the rebates available if you are replacing a heating system. And the incentive is to put in something that's more efficient. When you talk about efficiency, if you have a boiler or a furnace, boiler heats water, furnace heats air. If you have a combustion appliance that goes up a chimney, it's not great for efficiency. It cannot be great for efficiency. You're putting a lot of heat up that chimney. And when it shuts off, most of them just keep on drafting your warm air up the chimney. If you have sealed combustion, or even a fan assisted that goes out the sidewall of the house, you won't have that constant leak of warm air going out of the house. And they're more efficient. They capture more of that heat going out, so the gases going out are much cooler.
Can that be done on older furnaces? Can that be done on older furnaces, or does it require a new furnace?
Well, how many of you are getting their furnaces or boilers refurbished? Okay. Depending upon how high the water came, if you have a gas or oil, particularly gas is very sensitive to water, especially flood water that's got all sorts of contaminants in it that'll be corrosive. But it doesn't take much water to get inside those little tiny orifices to start corroding them and start affecting the flow of gas. It could even, if the water is high enough, get into the gas valve, because the pressure in a gas valve is not very high. So in cases like that, you really need to have your gas valve, all the burner tubes, maybe all of your electronic controls replaced, if you had any of that underwater.
Most of us did, we all have full
Yeah.
experience.
So you might, at that point, depending upon how much that's going to cost, you might consider a new system. Don't be talked into just the cheapest or necessarily the most expensive. I'm not going to go into all the whistles and bells, but a more expensive boiler is going to save you energy by, when it fires up, it doesn't fire up at 100%. It might start off a little bit lower, and as it senses that water's coming back is really cooler, it needs more, it'll ramp up the volume, turn up the flame, shall we say, to a higher degree. So you'll burn more fuel as you need it. In addition to what a lot of them do anyway, measure outside temperature. And if it's not that cold out, you don't need 190-degree water going around your baseboard. So look carefully at the different kinds of heating systems before you just jump in and buy a new one.
And can oil burners go in another part, above, on the first floor?
What if it went up on the first floor?
Because so many of these were ruined because they were in the basement.
Just asking, can you put them on the first floor?
The question is, can you put a central heating system on the first floor? Yes. Particularly if it's sealed combustion. The sealed combustion does not need as much clearance around it because it doesn't get as hot. They're well insulated. A lot of them are wall hung. So it depends upon how big of a boiler you need. I'll say yes, it is quite possible to put a boiler on the first floor. Go back to look at the whole picture before you do. Be careful, a lot of heating contractors look at what you have now. Okay, we'll put in the same size boiler. A heating contractor doesn't want to get that call when it's 10 degrees below zero that you're cold. So they tend to oversize. The problem with oversizing is it's very inefficient. If it's oversized, I've seen boilers that'll turn on and shut down 2 minutes later because they've heated up so quickly, because they're such big boilers, that they've satisfied the heat in 2 minutes. Boilers and furnaces are not efficient if they run for 2 minutes. They don't get efficient until they've been running for 5 minutes or more. Comparative fuel costs. Of course, wood is the least expensive, especially if you're cutting your own. That's hard to beat. Wood pellets are second, and they have some very good boilers and heaters out there now that burn wood pellets. Very clean, and it's a renewable energy. We don't have much natural gas in this area, none in central Vermont, so I'll skip that. Fuel oil. You know, the thing with fuel oil, though, is it's a very complex reaction, puts a lot of stuff into the air. They really need to be maintained every year. They need to be cleaned and serviced every year. Kerosene is a little cleaner version of fuel oil, more expensive. Some dealers use that because it can be stored outside and not gel. Propane is next, but it's much cleaner. You can get a much more efficient boiler or furnace burning propane than you can with oil. And they recommend service every 2 years. Most people don't even check it every 5 or 10 years. And then electricity. And these are based on present costs. I can give you a link later. There is a website that the state maintains on fuel prices. You can check it every week. They tell you what the average fuel prices are, the high and the low in the state. And you can see the trend. Right now, propane is leveling off and heading down. Fuel oil is heading up. So right now, propane and oil are almost the same when you're looking at energy content. The energy content of oil is about a third more than propane. 138,000 BTUs to gallon versus 96,000 per gallon for propane. Energy Star appliances. The refrigerators that are made today use much less electricity than those made 10 years ago. So look at the energy guide on any appliance you buy and see where it stands. Is it one of the most efficient or one of the least efficient or somewhere in between? There are rebates available for the more efficient models. Check with Efficiency Vermont. Water management around the house. This is keep the water from going towards your foundation to begin with. Grade away from the house. Use gutters that are pipes away from the house. If your leach field was underwater, you should have your septic system checked. Hardigan's or P&P Septic, one of those companies, can do that for you. If you have a well or a spring for your water supply, you should be testing that. If your drilled well was submerged, you should test that for coliform bacteria. Those test kits have been put out there for free. Local coordinators can give you the test kits, but check your water for bacteria before you use it for cooking or bathing or drinking. Electrical. If any part of your wiring was underneath water, it's the same as with the gas or an oil boiler. Your non-metallic sheath cable, what we call Romex, has paper inside of it. That paper just sucks up the water and it doesn't come out. It won't dry out. And it'll just corrode away at the wires inside. So if the wire has been submerged, most likely you need to replace that wire. If your breaker panel was submerged, if it's a public building, the state's requiring that you replace all of your breakers. If your breakers were submerged in water, it's probably a good idea to replace them all.
Options
from Efficiency Vermont is offering no-cost technical advice. If you have a technical question, you should call Efficiency Vermont, and they will direct you to the person that can answer that question, or they may send someone down. They're offering free assessments in air sealing. There are home performance with Energy Star contractors like myself that can come in and help you. There's the Vermont Weatherization Assistance Program for lower income people, if you meet the guidelines, and that Liz will talk about that. There's the Do-It-Yourself Home Energy Program, which was started last year. I'm a participating contractor. I had 3 clients last year, and it's basically you take a one-day workshop, you do a little bit of hands-on, you learn some of this science, learn some of the technical stuff of how and why you want to air seal. In the afternoon, you work with the foam guns, rigid insulation, you actually make that dam around the chimney, you work with cellulose, get some hands-on experience, and then you work with a participating contractor. They will do the blower door test for you, they will guide you, they will give you advice, you do the work, or some permutation of that. If you do all the earth sealing and hire them or hire somebody else to do dense packed cellulose, 2-part spray foam, whatever, it's another way that you can do the work and get rebates or incentives from Efficiency Vermont for improving the efficiency of your home. That's the Do-It-Yourself program. There's more information online. We have handouts here. The first one will be starting October 1st. I'll be running the one in Essex, and there's one in
Bennington on October 1st. I'll talk about that a little bit after, but it is pretty awesome. Yeah.
And we're talking about the possibility of people getting together or towns getting together and bulk buying appliances for even further savings.
Well, I covered this already, but I'm going to hammer it home again. If you've had flood damage in your home or business, this is a great program. A lot of the things that Brad spoke about, first thing he's going to do, or whatever contractor, if you call us to sign up for this, contractor will come out and do moisture assessment. Like all our contractors, I just want to reinforce, they're Building Performance Institute certified. We train and mentor those contractors, and if they're on our website, they've been certified by us to do this work. So call us, we'll set up an appointment to get somebody out to you. I know time is of the essence. Yes?
We're actually scheduled to have one of these next week.
I'm sorry?
We're actually scheduled to have one of these consultations next week.
Yeah.
And, you know, after we scheduled it, I was wondering to myself, how effective it is it to do a blower door test when my house is perforated, you know, 92 different ways. I've got, you know, free flow of air between the basement and the first floor. I have free flow of air through the floor, out the damaged foundation. I just don't understand how you can seal the environment in a way to create pressure differentials that will give you any information that's useful.
And Steve, don't forget the doors that don't quite shut either.
Yeah, those two.
So you're the second person that raised that tonight with me. You can, you know, but at the very minimum, they can come out and do a moisture assessment and just see what's going on. And I'm really not sure of the protocol about, you know, when they give you some advice on what you should do, or the wood is dry enough for you to proceed with your work, at what point they can come back and do that blower door assessment.
We're
Brad,
not
you-
going to do it if it's not going to be any use.
Yeah.
They will move on to other things that are more useful for you. Like, they're definitely not going to do stuff that, they're not there just to do the blower door. They're there to help you decide what's next to do and to do some air sealing for you.
So,
Yeah, it's great. So will they be able to come back, you know, if you know, it's not
you know, the key thing is you've taken the first step. You've contacted us, and again, it's an assessment. Let us come out and see what's going on. You know, if the moisture meter says that it's dry enough to start air sealing, they will proceed with that work. A lot of us, you know, if there's areas that are open to the outside, I mean, that, again, they don't have to do the blower door. The contractor can do some spray foam or caulking or foaming work to get you started down the road. Yes?
Sort of related question is that I have a friend who's going to have to significantly rebuild, and that may be 6 months in the future. Will the service still be available for them? I mean, they may be rebuilding from the foundation.
At this point, we have a limited amount of funds from the state, and I got to say it's first come, first served. If their foundation walls are still in place, if the rim joist is still there, I don't know if they can do any work, assuming that they're going to build up from the existing foundation. It's highly each case is individual, so I don't know what is going to be available in November. Hopefully, we'll still have the funds to follow up on that one.
Well, maybe it's, but still call and get that person.
Right. Get them in the queue, and they can explain the situation to our customer support folks.
Well, and if they're building completely new walls, right? Like if it really is that scenario, like then there are tons of opportunities at Efficiency Vermont, you know, for building, you know, more efficiently from the get-go. You know, so that's kind of a different scenario, but there's tons of like ways on new construction, but here's the right way to go with that. You know, so there's absolutely always call, you know, as he said, and just get in the queue. There are going to be people who will give you answers specific, or give your friend answers specific to their situation.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Just to clarify, what Efficiency Vermont is offering is free, first come, first served. It's like rapid assessment, 1 day with a certified energy auditor to help you with your reconstruction, to get you going in the right direction, get that air sealing done. It doesn't include insulating. It will be advice, but it's basically a day and a half that you have that auditor to do these things. Efficiency Vermont and I would like to encourage you to now look at the whole house. If you're going to be bringing in an insulation contractor to put in cellulose in these walls, why not do some up in the attic? Consider the whole house. If you do consider the whole house and you want to do a chunk of this, then look at the do-it-yourself program. It's beyond this rapid assessment. Start with a rapid assessment. This program Efficiency Vermont is offering. If you want to do more of the whole house, you want to do it, let's look into the do-it-yourself program. Get some more incentives from Efficiency Vermont. Or, if you've got the funds, say, well, we're going to insulate anyway, let's get a contractor in here, do a full energy audit, and do prioritized energy savings throughout the whole house. Have a contractor do the air sealing and the insulating of the whole house, not just that first floor that was damaged. Do you see the 3 different levels? Any questions?
Question.
So, back to that gentleman, if they are doing major reconstruction, 2 things I would say is they can enroll in our Energy Star Home program, and on the table over there is effective October 1st, Vermont residential building energy standards have been significantly upgraded. You know, that's something they should consider. It's the minimum building code. And then our Energy Star Home program, of course, takes it to the to a much higher level on if you're going to do that major retrofit or build a new home.
Well, I want to say this is great stuff, but a lot of us have been hit so hard financially. You know, I'm not even sure we'd be able to afford the contractors to come in and do a lot of this work. Can you give us an idea of what it would cost to bring in someone to do typical whole house weatherization? You know,
Typical
efficiency?
question is, a lot of us really can't afford to do the whole house. What would it cost? The average home could cost somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000, $15,000. Depends upon how big the house is, how complex. If you've got a contemporary with a lot of angles and a lot of nooks and crannies, that's harder to do than your nice basic cape or ranch. $5,000 to $15,000, that ballpark.
But I want to emphasize that we are not actually suggesting that you take that on right now. Okay, like let's be really clear here. Like in the perfect world, we love when people take this on. You know, we like people to make their homes more comfortable, more affordable, like invest in their homes. But you're already being forced to make all these other investments. You have to buy new heating systems, you have to deal with your walls, you have to deal with like couches, you know, beds, all these things. That is not what we're asking you to do. Like Efficiency Vermont is doing the rapid assessment program so people can get it quick and dirty, you know, and get some help right then. And, you know, I'm with Bob, take advantage of it, go for it. You know, because that contractor will be able to tell you where you are and what you need to do. And then you do what you need to do to get back into your house and be comfortable. I mean, the number one thing we're saying to folks is basements are a pain to do. They have to be emptied, you have to get out all the stuff. Your cellars are empty. You know, we can do work that will make your house more efficient. It will cost much less than it would have cost, you know, if you go to somebody's cellar who's not empty, because there isn't the work involved. And so and it will make a big difference to do some of these things at the basement level right now. And really, that's, you know, you're going to have to do work around there anyway. Let's get this work done. And that isn't like the giant number. You know, and there's lots of, you know, there's lots of resources. The other thing, it's probably a good time to talk a little bit about the weatherization program, because this program, you know, the rapid assessment is available to everybody, but it, you know, regardless of income, no, I'm going to get hit with the microphone, Jeannie here. All right. But it's also, I have these flyers for people who qualify at certain income levels. Just to give you an idea, for a family of 4 in Washington County, it's $42,000 a year. And there's lots of other qualifying things if there's other assistance. Folks who are retired, folks who are on disability, it's definitely worth checking out. We have programs that we're focusing on folks who are flood affected, and we're going to be able to do some matching to help folks buy furnaces and buy heating systems. So don't be shy about taking advantage of the services that are out there. You know. Yes, Kath?
We just tried to be an energy conscious landlord.
Yep.
Tenants pay utilities. And last year I just put in 2 energy efficient Buderos furnaces that now have to be replaced again.
Yep.
Are the rebates just for homeowners, or are they for rentals as well?
No, Bob can answer specifically on that. I can say that we have programs for landlords and renters, and so in terms of the, Kathy's saying she's a landlord and needs to replace furnaces.
Again.
Right. And so do the rebates apply there, Bob?
Yeah, I believe I spoke to you earlier. So, yes, those homes are eligible for our Home Performance with Energy Star program. We have increased incentives for heating system and hot water replacement. Each rental unit would be eligible for that. If it's a multi-family unit, 5 units or more, we have a separate program called Building Performance, which we'll get to later. But basically, the same theory. Home Performance with Energy Star, it's up to $2,500 per house, not counting some of the extra flood money. The multifamily is up to $7,500, and we'll cover that at the end of the slideshow.
So it's just the thing, we know that people are going to have to be cobbling bits of money together to figure this out. And we want to help you. We're here to help you. So it's this mix of what's the right, air sealing, what's the right level of insulation, what's the right level of heating equipment. You can't do it all. That FEMA money, that insurance money is not enough. So we are going to just try to work with folks to say, what's your best bet? And it may be put the money in the heating system. That may be how it works out for people.
We just jumped ahead since we brought this up.
It was confusing because I thought you meant you had to have 5 units or more because it says rental/receipt. That's why I was confused. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where you could be eligible for $7,500. And building performance contractor comes out and does an audit at just larger scale and more money at play for the multifamily. And that could include mixed use. So if there's a store on the first floor and apartments above. Yes.
I had 2 contractors come out to my home, and I got mixed messages. I've taken out 2 feet at least of my drywall because of heavy flood damage. And one contractor was leaning towards more the cellulose, and the other contractor was leaning more towards the foam insulation after the year seal is done. So where do you folks lay in that whole area of cellulose versus the foam?
I'm going to let Brad take that. I have my own opinions.
I will answer that carefully because you have to go back to look at the whole picture. And I haven't seen the pictures of your house yet.
I had
but
all the basement done 4 years ago, so that's done. I had the attic done by a certified home performance specialist. Okay, it's the area that I'm talking about is in the bedroom. It's on the first floor.
so what do you have in your upper walls now?
Fiberglass insulation.
Okay. Fiberglass is the bottom of my list. Science now knows that if fiberglass is not installed so that it is snug on all 6 sides, or if air is allowed to flow through it, like holes and penetrations, it's not very effective. Air moves right through the fiberglass. As a matter of fact, laboratory testing now shows when it's 0 outside and 70 inside, there will actually be convective currents inside, cooling down the outside of the wall, sinking down, warming up the inside, and air will move like this through the insulation, the fiberglass, to cool it off even more. So I'm not a fan of fiberglass. Cellulose, if it's installed properly, under pressure, so that it's what we call dense packed, it feels like a soft, foam rubber mattress. If you take the sheetrock off the wall, it's going to stay there. It's not going to settle. You do it with 1 hole in a stud bay, not the 2 or 3 hole method they did 20 years, 30 years ago. Cellulose is less expensive, is a little more expensive than fiberglass. When it's dense packed, air won't move through it. You don't need a moisture barrier. You don't need to be as critical about air sealing because air doesn't move through it very well at all. You don't have to worry about mice. This stuff is hydroscopic. It'll suck the water right out of the mice. They don't like it. It is about half the cost of foam. When cellulose gets wet, it handles the moisture very well. It will migrate through the cellulose, work its way out, unless it's absolutely soaking wet from a constant leak. spray foam, first thing is, it's great. You have to have an open wall. You can't inject it into a wall. Some people say you can, but we'll argue about that later. You cannot put it in. There are two kinds of foam, closed cell and open cell. Closed cell is a moisture barrier. R value about 6.5 to 7 per inch. Open cell is much lighter, and it is not a vapor barrier. It'll actually absorb moisture. You don't want to use that in Vermont. So we're talking closed cell foam, spray it on the outside wall. I suggest 3 inches. That's the new code is R21 as of October 1st. But go back to the 30-year rule. You're insulating for 30 years. You're not going to go back in there and re-insulate or add another inch of foam in 20 years. So 3 inches of foam, and let's say you've got a 3.5 inch or 4 inch stud bay, that's okay. That's your insulation. Actually, it was just posted last week on Facebook, the Hurricane Facebook page. The new product called Dense Armor Plus. And Building Science Corporation, which is very well world-renowned for building science, has looked at this and said, boy, here's a good solution. Especially if you're worried about reflooding like they are down on Bridge Street. We're not looking at a 100-year flood anymore, we're looking at a 10-year flood. What am I going to do? So the pros of the foam, you can spray it on, it won't absorb water. You can put this Dense Armor Plus in front of it, leave a gap at the bottom and the top. If it ever gets wet, you hose it out and you dry it out. It does not absorb water, this Dense Armor Plus. The only concern I have is, what does that do to any moisture that gets in behind your clapboards or your siding? That's my only concern. But otherwise, it sounds like a good deal. You got to get a competent foam installer though. If it's not installed properly, you're taking these two chemicals, you're mixing them together, and instantly, whoom, they make foam, and it expands, and it sets within 30 seconds. If you don't have the mix right, it's going to get crumbly. It's going to shrink. If it's put on too cold, it's going to shrink. And then you're going to have gaps all around your framing, and you're going to have a hard time sealing that. I've seen it. So if you use the foam, get a guarantee, make sure they use a blower door when they're done to show that the house is not leaking. So what I would suggest is pull out the fiberglass and dense pack the whole thing with cellulose. It's not that difficult. What I do, you may be able to pull the thing right out. What I do is I buy a stovepipe kit, 2-foot lengths of threaded flexible rod. However many you need, I go and get threaded rods, screw it in there, cut a piece off, make a little hook, put it up, twist it, pull it down, up, push, pull it down. Get that out there. If you're not going to do that, I would put fiberglass back in that wall. I would not do foam, I would not do cellulose, just for 2 feet. I'd put fiberglass back in, deal with it in the future. If you're not going to get that fiberglass out up there, put fiberglass in down below.
Okay, Tom?
Quick question, Brad. Back when you were talking about mold versus rot, the numbers jumped around a little bit, and I just wanted to get a clarification because we've been using 14 as a number to attain with some stuff, and 15 is acceptable. But then you went over and said rot occurs at 22 or higher. You want to get it to 19 for rot, but what's the number still for mold and mildew?
The difference is we're talking moisture content of wood. The mold doesn't grow in the wood, it grows on the wood. So you're actually talking more you want to get the moisture out of the wood so the surface of the wood doesn't have enough moisture for mold to grow. I don't know where the 14 and 15% came from.
They came.
The FEMA guidelines say 15%. That's what our technical staff have said is the target. If you have 15% or less,
Yeah, I just don't know what the scientific basis is. There is scientific basis for the 21%. I mean, there's studies for the rot. I just don't know how that correlates to mold.
Right. Listen, I'd like to get through the last couple of slides. We can take questions after. I think it'll be more productive that way. I know that we've thrown a lot at you here today. This is the first time we've done the presentation ourselves. So the first thing, we've covered it. The house assessment, you want to take advantage of that. When the contractor comes out and does his work and makes recommendations for the bigger picture, home performance with Energy Star is where you want to go, probably. And this is the flyer that's in your packet. This details the incentives that Efficiency Vermont offers day in, day out for the past 2 years to help you with the larger insulation project in your home. It also talks about heating system replacement. It's a comprehensive analysis of your home, electrical, thermal, and health and safety. It does a combustion analysis of your furnace or hot water heater if it's atmospherically vented. So the health and safety, carbon monoxide we're concerned about, moisture and mold, backdrafting. So when you do insulation work, and this is a key thing with home performance with Energy Star, they come out and they do that baseline blower door if they can do that, right? In normal cases, they will be able to. They come up with a blower door number. And then you go ahead with the insulation and air sealing and insulation work. The home performance contractor has to test out. We don't want to make your home so tight that it affects any combustion equipment in the house. And that you're not going to die of carbon monoxide poisoning. So that's a key component of that comprehensive analysis of your home. I'm going to give it back to Liz because there's a couple of slides that she wants to cover, and then we'll open it for questions.
We did talk about this mostly. I have brochures available, so if folks have questions on this, I can answer them. But just anybody in Washington, Orange, or Lamoille County is in our region, and so weatherization, we come to your house, we do this work, it's free if you meet the income guidelines. I wish it was free for everybody, actually, but there isn't enough money in the world. So it is an excellent program, and if you are around folks who you think might qualify, tell them to call us, and we help with furnace replacement and appliances and all those pieces. So just get a look at those numbers. Don't be shy. Take a look at the flyer. I've got a bunch of them on the table. And just say, hey, there's lots of folks where their income is not what they wish it was. And it's okay. This is a service that is available. Let's go on and talk about the do-it-yourself a little bit. Brad talked about this a little bit. Really what I want to say about this is if you are handy, or if you're forced into being handy, or if you have friends or family members who are handy, this is a great program. We're going to teach you how to do the stuff that Brad was talking about, how to use the foam, how to do that box cell, how to deal with your attic, and in conjunction with somebody who is a professional, and when you have your home energy assessment, you can do a lot of this work yourself. When people say, Brad was saying like that, somebody asked what the regular cost is, right? Why does it cost? Because we send lots of people to crawl around your attic. It costs money, to pay people to crawl on their hands and knees. But if you want to crawl on your hands and knees, you don't have to pay yourself. And we will teach you how to do it safely. So I've got lots of these flyers. It's $50. 75 for couples. You can do something romantic together and learn how to do weather stripping. But we've got them all over the state in October and November, and it's very hands-on. It's very little of the slide presentation and very much of the, no, let's try that bead of foam again. So it's really useful. They teach you how to do cellulose. There are definitely some limits where they'll say, this is for a pro to do, this is for you to do. And they're very clear, it's in cases where you could hurt yourself or, you know, you could make your walls explode, for example, if you're not 100% clear on what you're doing with dense packing. But they're certified professionals who teach you, and they tell you right where that line is. And on the do-it-yourself program, you have access, when you work with a certified contractor, they're supervising you. They're there for you. They're there for you to call. You send them a text a picture and say, does this look right? You know, that's the program. And you have access to those same home performance incentives. Vermonters like to do it themselves, you know, so that's kind of why we have this. So, and then the bulk piece, I think we talked about that a little bit, but we talked about this in Richmond. If folks want to get together and buy appliances, go for it. Find somebody to work with you. All we would say is look on that list of what Efficiency Vermont is giving incentives on and buy those. Because then you get the incentive and you'll get a higher efficiency appliance. You know, it's not necessarily the best use of your dollars to go and negotiate with Sears for a low efficiency appliance. I don't know, what can we say beyond people in this world care a lot about carbon monoxide detectors, and you should too. Bob, do you want to talk about business? Does anybody here want to hear about business, or you just want to ask questions? Right, I know, like there's a, just tell business owners there's stuff for them, okay? Yep. Yep. Landlords are businesses, in the, you know, considered in the, by the state of Vermont and by, you know, FEMA and by the SBA and all those pieces. In terms of the programs available, it will depend on how many units, in terms of what's available for them. I know that FEMA is actively seeking people who are landlords. They want to prioritize them and work with them. So if you are a landlord, please contact your emergency leader or your town manager. I know in Waterbury, Bill Shepluck is seeking landlords. FEMA has said they will prioritize people in terms of trying to help them, people who have apartments, multifamily buildings. So there's, I don't know, I just know that Bill said to me, we're looking for landlords, tell them to call me. So. He said it to me last night, Kat, so it's not like we've had a lot of time to get the word out. But FEMA is looking to try to do some special programs to get people back into rentals, you know, so that we can get those rentals up to par. So.
Brad, did you want to share anything else with us?
A couple of quick safety warnings that I wanted to mention. It's maybe a little too late for the biggest part, but a lot of these homes were built well before 1978, and we're dealing with lead paint. And everyone really should be aware of the dangers of lead paint. A lot of this wood trim siding was ripped off, full of lead paint. I mean, had to do it. You can get these test swabs at local hardware stores. Lead check kit. It's 2 little glass vials, you break them, you swab it. If it turns pink, you have lead paint. At least when you're working, don't put your hands in your mouth, wash them, wash your hands frequently. Vermiculite. If you are mucking around up in your attic and you see this stuff, this is vermiculite. It's a mineral. It heated up, it looks like it pops up like popcorn. Very popular as an insulating material because you could pour it out of bags. The homeowners could just pour it. 1992, they discovered that the vermiculite that was sold, 70% of what was sold in the United States came from a mine in Libby, Montana, that was very heavily contaminated with asbestos. So if you find this vermiculite, we have to treat this as a hazardous material. Don't disturb it. You could be putting asbestos in the air. Radon. As you tighten up your house, radon becomes more of a concern. You can do a short-term test State Health Lab on Colchester Avenue sells kits. I think they're like $15, $20. Leave it there for 5 days. So when you tighten up your house, do a short-term radon test. The state will give you a test for free, but you have to leave it there for 6 months to a year. 15% of the homes in Vermont are at or above the EPA action limit of 4 picocuries per liter. And a lot of people are not testing, and people are finding out that they do have radon. So it's a good idea. Don't guess, test. I can give you numbers if you'd like afterwards.
Got a question back here. On the radon.
Yep.
What do you do if you find radon?
If what?
If you find radon, what do you do?
If you find radon, you generally, well, you repeat the test, and you may need a radon mitigation system. Basically, it's a fan underneath the foundation, or they may put plastic on the floor and put a fan under there to create a negative pressure. Radon comes through the soil into the house. And I can go into all the technical aspects of it, talk more about it after, but it's a gas. You want to get that gas out of there. For a typical house built today, a radon mitigation system is around $2,000 to install. It's a fan, runs 24 hours a day.
I've been trying to dry out my basement with fans and dehumidifiers and not making any progress. It seems like I should be laying down some plastic on the floor. So could you describe exactly what type of plastic? It doesn't come in gigantic sheets.
Question is, I have a dirt floor, I've been trying to dry it out and it's not drying out. What do you recommend for plastic? The flood relief headquarters in Waitsfield has plastic for you. So call them.
I don't know if Waterbury does, but we'll find out.
They've donated, somebody's donated a whole bunch of it. Preferably 6 mil plastic, generally clear. You can get it if you go out and buy it. 10 foot wide by 100 foot is typical, something you can handle. You can get it wider, you can get 20 foot wide, but in a basement I think 10 feet's comfortable. You don't need to tape it, you don't need to glue it, just overlap it by at least a foot, if not 2 feet. Do the whole floor. If you have a dry laid stone foundation, drape some more up onto the foundation. Don't cover the sill plate with it. You don't want to push that moisture right into your foundation, into the wood. It'll rot it.
Actually, I have, the top of the basement has been spray foam. Should I go right up to that?
Go right up to the spray foam, yes.
What a great
You might take some nails or something and just pin it in.
Uh-huh.
If you happen to get a water leak or get water on top of it, poke some holes in it, let it drain. It's basically stopping the evaporation. Any other questions?
I don't know who before. I was looking for information tonight both on how do we test for mold and on the instant on hot water heaters.
Instant on hot water. All right, how do we test for mold? The proper way, you really should get contact and mold. If you're really concerned about mold, you need a specialist. Mold is everywhere. You're going to find it. It's a question of how much and what kind. And I think that's a little beyond. You can go and buy these little test kits at some stores, but I don't think that information is really useful. A professional will take swipes and can measure it and identify it. They can take air samples through a filter. They measure it. They can identify it. That's what they do. Otherwise, we look visually. Do you visually see mold? That's what we generally go by. Or do you smell it?
Does the moisture test give you any indication of whether you'll have mold? Like if you have a low moisture, like when the people come to do the moisture test.
Yeah.
If you have a low level of moisture, wouldn't that indicate you might not have mold?
That's right.
So if no one's done that, wouldn't that be a good first step? Even like if you've got open spaces so they can't do the blow air test, the moisture meter reading could help.
But when you're testing, if you're using a meter, don't just do the stud that's standing right here 3 feet at a nice convenient spot. Go in that corner. That's where you're going to find the wetness, is where the air can't flow very well. Look in those nooks and crannies and see if it's wet behind there. We also had a question about water heaters. If you have one that goes up the chimney and you have to replace it, I recommend get one that is fan assisted to go through the side. Tankless water heaters, they're much more expensive. They are really not that efficient unless they are appropriate if you use a lot of hot water in a short time. If you've got a family of 4 or 5, everyone wants a nice hot shower every morning between 7 and 7:30, tankless hot water might be for you. If it's a family of 2, no. Stick with a regular tank hot water heater. The tankless, also when you turn them on, any combustion equipment, it's not very efficient when you first turn it on. So if you're drawing off 2 gallons of water and then it shuts off, it's not 85% efficient, it's 70% efficient. Any other questions?
We have, let's go way back. We have our kids, before we got home on Monday, the day after the flood, took all of our wooden furniture and washed it off with a pressure washer, but it hasn't been washed with soap and water. We have cupboards that we inherited. They're in a storage shed now. So that should I go down to the storage shed and wash everything with soap and water besides a mildew protector or bleach?
If did they put bleach in the power washing or any soap?
I don't know. I'll have to ask.
See, the power washing alone might have washed it away.
I didn't want to bring mold back into my house that's been in a storage shed.
Are they dry?
Yes,
If they're dry, they don't smell like mold, they don't see any mold,
outdoors. I mean,
I wouldn't worry about it.
Spray them with the moldicide, too, right? Shouldn't they spray it with moldicide?
You can also do a mildew side. There are commercial products. The mildew side tends to be longer lasting than the bleach. When bleach is exposed to oxygen, to the air, it breaks down rather quickly. And that's another good point. If you use bleach, make sure it's fresh. If you open a bottle of bleach and it sits there for a few months and you go back to use it, it might not be bleach anymore. Just open the cap, just take a whiff, don't stick your nose right in it, take a whiff. If you don't smell bleach, it's not bleach anymore. It's all broken down. Get a fresh bottle.
I noticed that around my big old wooden windows, and there's leaky storm windows on the other side, that there's plenty of mold. Like if I just wipe them, they're black, you know? So what's the best thing to do in that area, you know, where the window, the glass meets the frame of the window? All my windows are like that. I mean, they've been like that for years, I'm sure.
Soap and water and maybe a little bit of bleach after that.
Okay.
And they're chronically like that, black, did you say?
Yeah, because the storm windows are not good.
Yeah. So I have seen windows that have black on them even without the flood. And it's because there's a cold spot somewhere. Warm air is leaking out and it's hitting cold air coming in, so you're getting condensation. You need to tighten them up. That's where some of that weather stripping I passed around, using something like that in between the 2 windows or on the sides, put in proper sash locks, can do a lot to cut down the air infiltration and minimize that black mold you see from condensation. By the way, windows are at the bottom of the list for energy efficiency. To replace a window for saving energy, very long payback. If you have an old double hung window and put a storm window on the outside or the inside, that is almost as effective as a mid-priced double hung window installed today. At an average of $600 a window, that's a long payback.
Was your comment to her about the stored furniture only for solid wood or also for upholstery?
That was for solid wood. If you have upholstered furniture, I don't think you're going to save it.
Just strip it.
The mold gets into the fabric, it's got to go, unfortunately.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Is Zonalite the same as vermiculite, only made by a different company?
Is Zonalite the same as vermiculite? I have brain freeze right now. I believe it is. I think that's a brand name, of vermiculite. If you happen to have bags of it, and it says where it came from, and it's not Libby, Montana, it doesn't have asbestos in it.
I haven't had a bag of it for 50 years, but
Some people
I still have it in my walls.
Oh, okay. And unfortunately, they said you can't test for it because people would mix lots. So you might have asbestos, no asbestos here, none here, but have it here, here, and here. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming.